Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Neighborhood Keeper, a collaborative initiative for our ICS community, sponsored by Dragos. My name is Tim Brink with the SANS Institute, and I'll be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Rob M. Lee, SANS Certified Instructor and Founder and CEO of Dragos, Tim Conway, Technical Director of the ICS and SCADA programs at SANS, Matt Bodman, Director of Special Programs and Privacy Officer at Dragos. If during the webcast you have any questions for Rob, Tim, or Matt, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Tim.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. For those of you wondering, like I was last night, of what Matt Bodman looks like, it's going to continue to be a mystery to you, as he has previously exited a role where he does not have a social media presence. But I think over time, at the various events that we all gather at, we will be able to meet him and greet him, and he may be going by other names, but Matt Bodman is his role for today. Thanks for joining us. We have a whole bunch of material to go through as we usually try to pack into these webcasts, just like we do every SANS course and every SANS talk. And whenever Rob and I are together on stage, we generally don't have enough time. So we will move quickly and hope we have questions. But if we don't, any questions that come in, I will try to answer throughout the webcast, or if they're specific to Rob or Matt while they're talking, they will follow up with you when the webcast ends. So without any further delay, let me grab a mouse and move. A couple of things, and really the last item that I want to focus on here is at the bottom of this chart. Generally, any one of these items here as we look at trends and the direction things are heading. So just kicking off the presentation for people who are either new to the ICS space or new to some of the challenges that we're facing from a cybersecurity and ICS. As we look to the growing amount of digital devices and cyber-enabled operational technology devices that are being added into plant floor and shop environments and remote field environments, or even control center environments or control room, that is growing more and more every day with every implementation and every project. And the interconnectedness, the interdependence of those systems on each other is increasing and moving more and more to the right of this scale, where bad things could occur, either through failure of the devices, unavailability, degradation, or as Rob and I and a number of people in this community tend to focus more of our talks on, is the misuse of those devices that are now growing in numbers and growing in interconnectedness and interdependence on each other. From the people that are more on the compliance or management or leadership side or policy side of country, or even of an industry, the regulatory risk and the amount of requirements and controls is growing and moving to the right to an area where it's getting more and more attention from asset owners and operators and vendors and integrators in the space. The growing kind of list of targeted ICS cyber attacks we've had, from when we started looking at this in early 2000s, the types of things we used to worry about compared to what we worried about in the 2010 timeframe and compared to what we worry about now is vastly different. And while there's oftentimes a industrial control system cyber attack or some event that occurs that we can globally talk about as a community and learn from and build case studies and defense use cases and white papers, there's often a host of those types of attacks that are not public, not talked about, and you can only really hear about those in kind of anonymous ways of what some companies who work in this space are seeing. But that list and that level of concern is also moving to the right. For this webcast and for what we hope to talk about for the remainder of this webcast is kind of this item on the bottom, the growing list of cybersecurity tools for industrial control system environments, and the feature sets of those tools and how to operationalize that data set and that view, as well as the training in the space. This is one thing that is helping the asset owners and operators and vendors in the community at large, as the list of those tools is growing and growing, and it's moving kind of that risk trend to the left. As long as you are an organization who is aware of it, pursuing it and kind of training staff and adopting those tools and implementing them with the appropriate care and feeding that they need. And that is really what we're going to try to focus on here. There's kind of a really, really important initiative that is underway to help the asset owners and operators, being led by Dragos. And it's something that I'm really, really excited about. And I hope for those listening on the call, it's something you can all kind of pick up, pursue, and try to find how you can make use of this. Just again, quickly, and this will be hopefully very quick, looking kind of from the past, present, and future, from the early days, basic cyber digital assets being added into control environments with basic kind of view or status. Not a whole lot of cybersecurity risk or concern from remote adversaries. Generally speaking, it would be an insider threat or some level of very, very skilled and capable individual that would have a means of getting into that environment, not through a direct kind of command and control or interactive remote access capability. As time moved on, and we started looking into optimizing some of those systems, and we started interconnecting, and we started making them a little bit more interdependent. We had more connectivity, but still some limited visibility from an asset owner perspective of the communications and at the network level, meaning we didn't necessarily have the tools. A lot of the vendors wouldn't support things like switch port spans or port mirroring or data collection within operational technology environments. So kind of what that communication looked like, what normal looked like, wasn't really well understood or known. As we move forward, and this is kind of that bottom line on the trends, we started to see vendors supporting that capability where you could start to look into the networks and see the communications, and then the corresponding innovation and technology that allowed you to understand what normal looked like and what was actually happening in those environments. Flashing forward, you start to look at where we are now and where we're going, and it's more of an understanding of what normal looks like, and getting some level of, this doesn't look right to me. Who can I share that with? Who can I get a better understanding of what I can do about this, and what kind of action should I take? What types of response actions should happen at these different sites? Just as an example, again, one sector that we've seen this occur in, kind of the North American bulk electric system, along the same exact timeline. When we didn't have connectivity, we didn't really have cybersecurity standards. As we started to grow in connectivity and interdependence, and we saw the impact that could occur, we started to develop kind of initial standards of what needed to be done and to what level of information sharing and reporting needed to occur. As time went on, and we started seeing kind of more capabilities and sort of this reluctance to report and reluctance to share information, the standards have matured over time, kind of moving asset owners in that direction. So they were looking at more types of assets and reporting more things. Looking forward, it's just as the capabilities continue to mature, the requirements and regulations and standards continue to mature, you're going to continue to see expanded requirements for reporting and information sharing. Just a quick brief on that, and this is something that it's more for people outside of the electric sector to learn from the mistakes that we've made. In the very early days, there wasn't a definition of what a cybersecurity incident was. Each utility got to roll their own, which in many cases, if you're looking at creating standards for oil and natural gas, or you're creating standards for some other country or some other sector, anytime you're leaving it up to an asset owner to kind of roll their own or make their own definitions or declare a cybersecurity incident, the general tendency is define it in a way where one could never occur, or where a cybersecurity incident could occur, but a reportable cybersecurity incident may not. So in the early days, there was nothing. Then we made a giant leap, and we actually defined what a cybersecurity incident was. So a compromise of a physical or an electronic perimeter, or a disruption of the cyber assets within that physical or electronic perimeter. That's a clear definition of what a cybersecurity incident was, and that is well understood and adopted throughout the bulk electric system in North America. The point where there was concern is what a reportable cybersecurity incident wasn't a compromise or a disruption, it had to do with what those cyber assets performed. So you had to actually have a reliability task get interrupted. So some type of situational awareness from the control center, or dynamic response or voltage control, or dispatch from a control room, or an actual outage like we saw in Ukraine down at substation level or at a generation asset level. You would need some type of reliability event before it was reportable, which, as many, and we explained to many in the industry, especially after response actions in Ukraine, it would be similar to standing at your front door watching criminals kick down the door, come in, pour gasoline all over your house, gather up all the jewelry in a bag, and you're just standing there watching it all. And the instant that they exit the door and light your house on fire, you call the fire department and the police. The entire time they're in your house, you're doing nothing. That is a well understood, not good approach. And to make it easier for all to understand, we had talked to Rob about this, and Rob quickly turned it into a snarky cartoon, which this kind of tells the entire story as you're watching the bad actors approach, and as soon as something horrific happens, now it becomes a reportable cybersecurity incident where you have 1 hour to action it. That better response and more rapid detection, improved information sharing, all of that is fairly well understood that we needed to do better. Also fairly well understood that regulation isn't always the answer, that regulation will never keep up with cyber attacks and cyber trends or cyber threats. So a series of voluntary programs have kind of started throughout electric sector in North America, one of those being CRISP, the Cybersecurity Risk Information Sharing Program. Again, completely voluntary, largely driven by a dozen bulk electric system, large asset owners and operators, really designed to kind of place a passive information sharing device at the internet-facing point of those asset owners, and then collecting data, sharing that back to the national lab infrastructure through Pacific Northwest National Labs, having them review, look for any type of coordinated event, look for any type of common indicators across those different information sharing devices, and then sharing that information out through the EISAC, the Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center, where all bulk electric system asset owners and operators have view and visibility to that data. Over time, this is something that started off as a not driven by regulation, voluntary program. It's fantastic. It's occurring kind of at this perimeter device. How great it would be to get down into those environments further, down closer to where the operational assets are. Generally speaking, if we're talking about the types of attacks that people like Rob would care about, people like myself would care about, we're not necessarily super interested in all the noise and all the activity and chatter that's happening at the internet-facing side, but we would be very, very interested in what's happening at the operational technology perimeter, or even better, within the OT space and segment. So that's kind of the next great hurdle, is getting data view down in that operational perimeter, or even better within those operational environments. As we look to kind of the gap that we see, the voluntary programs try to fill it, but also regulation tries to catch up and bridge those gaps. The waiting until there's an actual compromise that has an effect, that is something that FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has decided that is not acceptable. So they are accelerating the reporting requirements, accelerating the reporting timelines, and modifying and including multiple parties that you must report to, along with some reporting details. So you're seeing this kind of parallel approach of, we're going to try to adjust this and fix it on the regulation side, and we're going to fix it with more and more voluntary programs that are acceptable and kind of accessible to more electric utilities than just the biggest 12 or biggest 20 asset owners and operators that choose to volunteer. As we talked about, how do we get more and more of the utilities involved? And saying there's 10 or 12 or 15 involved is awesome, but looking at the thousands that exist in North America, and then looking across the countries that are allies and the hundreds of other utilities that would like to share data, would like to share information, would like to get down closer and closer to the operational technology environments. And this whole concept of more of the same way the electric standards and voluntary programs started, with NERC first being a council after a couple of large North American blackouts that occurred out east. We all understood that regardless of how secure or how resilient or reliable your electric infrastructure is, if your neighbor's isn't, you immediately feel that pain at the speed of light due to electron flow. So if they have an outage, you feel that in your system. And as we've cyber-enabled things, we start to understand the same thing. If your neighbor and your intertie utility and who you rely on starts to have cybersecurity-related operational impacts, that could absolutely impact you regardless of your cybersecurity posture. And it's this whole concept of how the electric utilities work, how they operate on this interdependent critical infrastructure, and similar to where your home is, kind of your neighborhood watch. That from a neighborhood watch perspective, each person doing their part to immediately report suspicious activities. And the second side of this is the trust of being willing to share that information. To the degree that that can happen more at a machine level, more at a asset to asset, as things are happening, it's being viewed, and it's being viewed by people that this is what they do, versus at a smaller municipality or a co-op that they may not have anyone that could staff sit and look at these alerts and these things that are coming up routinely and distinguishing between good and bad. But they may very well have someone that could, if they were told this is not good, you should go do something about it, they could action it. Far more common that they have somebody who could action it than they have staffs of people sitting around that could actually look and identify. From that kind of discussion and hearing about what Rob and Matt are going to talk about and kind of this project that Dragos has led, it's truly kind of an innovation, and it's looking to fill this gap between gathering data sets from participating utilities, getting down further and further into that operational level, working with partners like Department of Energy and specifically Idaho National Labs, and sharing that information back out to the Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center. So again, just like with CRISP, but now expanded even more down to distribution level companies and smaller to mid-sized organizations that are a feed into this data set and consuming it on the back end from the EISAC side, whether they're participating in Neighborhood Keeper or not. The CRISP data kind of overlaying it and enriching it to see if there's any commonalities from the Internet Information Sensor, plus the data set that's now internal to these organizations, being pushed out to all entities, whether they're members or not, and ultimately any other partner ISACs that are doing work with the EISAC, as they have a series of MOUs in existence with other countries and with other critical infrastructure. All in, it's where I remember a meeting with myself and Rob and Mike Asante where we talked about what a great thing it would be to have an industrial control system version of the Internet Storm Center. And this is absolutely moving down that path in a very innovative way, in a way that's affordable for all participating utilities. And it's something that I'm proud to be associated with, and I'm anxious to hear more about. So with that, I think I will turn this over to Rob.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so for everybody, this is Rob. What I want to do is quickly tell you a little bit about Dragos. I think obviously most of the presentation is about Neighborhood Keeper, but as our community continues to grow, I find it more relevant and more important to first introduce ourselves instead of just making the assumption that people know who we are. And to talk about Neighborhood Keeper, I'm going to have to talk about the technology that we have. So it's less meant to be a pitch and more of just here's what the actual tech is. So from a Dragos perspective, if you haven't run across us before, essentially we were founded back in 2016. There's my ugly mug up on the screen, but also my two co-founders who don't get enough credit, John and Justin. Basically, we Came out of the intelligence community, always been working the ICS mission set, and decided that really the way to scale knowledge was through software. I obviously am very passionate about training and education, still teach at SANS. A lot of the focus of what we do, even in how we market ourselves, is mostly through content and white papers instead of pitches. But it's largely the software element that helps scale that human knowledge fast enough. So that was kind of the vision of what we built out. Today, we're very fortunate to have over 120 employees, which is just crazy to think about. We have the largest concentration of ICS security talent in the world. And we're fortunate to have over 105 customers across 20 countries now. From a thing that makes us the most proud, and just to kind of put some stats on there of who we are, I think the thing that makes this team special, the thing that makes me the most proud about them, is they are the practitioners. You know, we can go down the list of people that we've heard from throughout the years, look to people that were speaking on topics or responding to incidents, and most of them are at Dragos now. And the other thing is, even though we have our services and intel team, which I'll mention in a second, everything ends up getting focused on that software component. So I've heard before, like, oh, you're doing services, you know, what's the balance with software? Actually, our services team is maxed at 50% billables. So we're unlike other consultancies on the services side, where they usually do 70, 80, 90% billables. And we actually keep the team at home, as it were, at least 50% of the time, to focus their lessons learned and driving it back into the tech. I think one of the biggest challenges for our community in the ICS security space is there's a tendency of companies, standards, frameworks, regulations, et cetera, to copy and paste IT security standards and IT security best practices, just copy and paste that into the industrial environments. So really what we're trying to do is centralize knowledge, develop unique ICS security expertise, and transfer that back into our software so that our customers can take advantage of it. As a company, we really do three things. We have the Dragos Platform, which I'll mention, and like I said, it's core to understand for Keeper. That technology I'll go through in a second. It's the heart of our ecosystem. It's the focus of our company. We also have something called Dragos Worldview, which is our intelligence offering. So we have an intel team that goes out and tries to understand the unique tradecraft and MO of the threats, instead of just focusing on indicators, looking more of their TTPs and understanding how they're doing these actions. And weekly, I think there's 2 or 3, 4 reports a week on the latest on different ICS vulnerabilities, threats, and unique insights across that community. And then our security services that do everything from proactive services like architecture assessments and pen testing and red teaming and tabletop exercises, to actual boots on the ground incident response, and to even our 5-day class that we have for training people in our ranges and environments. So with all that being said, what's the tech? The tech is a passive network appliance, so it's a software, but think of it as a device that you deploy into your industrial networks and passively maps out the environment. The way that we kind of differentiate as a company, besides having the services and intel work, is there's really 3 modules to our technology. The first is that asset identification and anomaly detection module. That's essentially what is big in the market right now across a number of different vendors. We will all argue about who's best and who does better and who has more protocols. But for us, it's table stakes. It's important. It's really, really vital. But it really is just the challenge of today to be able to identify and visualize your environment and notice changes. The tomorrow challenge that we see most people running into is once they deploy out a technology and they start getting anomalies and random things that are occurring, they really want to know what actually matters. And instead of getting 10, 20, 30,000 false positives a day of anomalies you got to run down, they want to understand which 3 they actually should care about. That's where our threat analytics come in play. So it's our intel team making analytics of what adversary tradecraft actually looks like and why you should care and what the adversaries are actually trying to accomplish. So that's our intel driven kind of approach. And then on top of that, we have our investigation playbooks, which think of it as not only a case management system, but also a full workbench. One of the concerns that I have for products on the market is folks thinking that you can just generate anomalies and kick it to an enterprise SIEM and you'll be okay. The challenge is that SIEM analyst and that SIEM doesn't have content and correlation and understanding of what to do with that data. So yes, we can connect into your enterprise SIEM and similar, but you can natively work through the investigation. If you think about it, our intel team is pushing those analytics every couple weeks to folks. our services team is the one that are making those playbooks. So they're step-by-step guides of how you would actually respond to and analyze those individual analytics. We don't expect there to be tens of thousands of ICS security analysts in the next couple of years. So the idea is to centralize that knowledge and then transfer it to our customers. In the deployments, and this is the exact same from a neighborhood keeper perspective, deployments, again, just think of it as, we call it a midpoint sensor, but think of it as a network appliance that hangs off of a span or tap down in the industrial environments. It doesn't matter about monitoring anything IP-based. You can collect, we can pull in different types of data sets to include syslog and data historians. We have a great integration with OSIsoft as an example. So we can, one of the things that is unique to us is we can pull in lots of different data sets to be able to give you a full picture of what's happening instead of just trying to live off packet capture, although that is very, very relevant and important. So long story short, you would have some server on site, we call it our site store, and you'd have some midpoint sensor you can deploy to different environments throughout the network. That's the bare minimum level of knowledge you need for the neighborhood keeper portion. If you want to dive into the Dragos platform discussion, feel free to hit us up. We can always go through demos and similar of that. But that's what you want to know for what builds on top of that. So this is a program that I just get really excited about. Obviously, I love my company as a whole. I believe in our technology and similar, but a lot of my time is actually spent talking and working with folks on Neighborhood Keeper. Matt does way more of it than I do these days, but usually when I'm up in Congress or talking to boards at different energy companies and similar, this is really what I'm talking about these days. To me, there's been a challenge in our community to date. I think we've always had just fantastic people trying to do the right thing as it comes to industrial security. Asset owners and operators they're not falling behind. This isn't, oh, ICS security is 10 years behind IT security. Really, they're just making thoughtful choices about their risk, and they just want to know what the right choices are. But the challenge is, as Tim alluded to, with kind of being interconnected to your neighbors, is that many of our community members lack resources. So even if you gave them technology or services or free assessments or whatever, the ability to action that is lacking. Now, not all co-ops and munis are small, but there's a lot of small cooperatives and municipal infrastructure across electric and water and looking even into manufacturing and natural gas. Smaller players that can be extremely impactful to the larger national security. You can definitely impact distribution in a way that impacts transmission, but they're also just critical to the local communities. And so I want to be careful of that critical. I always hear critical infrastructure, and it's hard to define that because I'm from Coleman, Alabama originally. I don't think anything inside of Coleman would be considered critical infrastructure, but it's damn critical to my family and my friends, and so it's critical to me. And so I think all of our infrastructure in that way is critical to somebody. From an information sharing struggle, I think a big challenge that everyone's had over the years is we all talk about sharing programs or sharing methodologies. We hear sticks and taxi. We hear yet another format that comes out. And the reality is one of the difficulties around information sharing is most people were sharing data, not information. It was, here's a bunch of data. I hope somebody uses it to make it useful. And really what people were wanting was information and context, if not even intelligence, which is knowledge about what they're supposed to do in any given situation. And so when you centralize a bunch of data, people usually drown in that data and don't get the insights, especially not in a timely manner that they should. And further, you have to share a bunch of data, which means there's privacy concerns. And especially as you talk about ICS and OT networks, those insights are limited with a good reason. We don't want to be sharing out highly sensitive data out of the ICS environment just to be decentralized in one location to hope that we might find something to then share. It just doesn't work at scale. So Neighborhood Keeper was the sort of the idea that we envisioned up. And like I said, like Tim said earlier, I can't take full credit for this. This is something I put together, but it was off of the discussions with tons of people in the community before. I mean, there are many nights that Tim and Mike and I would spend with a good glass of whiskey and talking about what would we do if we were king for a day. Luckily, the Department of Energy has a fantastic program that really, in my opinion, offers the community opportunities to go outside the box and innovate and do something different without assuming all the commercial risks that you would normally do. That Department of Energy program is called the SEDS program. So under the SEDS program, there was a roadmap built, basically a roadmap for the electric sector, saying what do we need to do to get security across our infrastructure, and what do we need to do for a multi-year strategy. Instead of pretending like we can do this, in a 2, 3, 4 years, what's a 10 or 15-year view for our infrastructure? Later, and we're later in the SEDS program, and SEDS been around for a while now, and people are starting to ask about kind of the end of the roadmap. Some of the end of the roadmap discussions were the items that I have up here were the ones that we picked out and mapped for Neighborhood Keeper, and we mapped for our proposal. So we submitted a proposal to the SEDS program. It was a competitive process. We said, look, we'd like to pick this up, and we'd like to do this. Specifically, these 4 roadmap items we think we can solve. We think we have an answer for. So the goal then for roadmap item 4.5 is to get cyber detection tools that actually evolve with the threat landscape. So instead of just throwing around buzzwords like AI and blockchain or whatever, show me that you actually know what the ICS threat landscape is, and show me you know how to detect those attacks. And so the goal then is to deploy commercial off-the-shelf technology, which in this case is the Dragos Platform, and then to build an abstracted layer above that, which really is a cloud analytics framework, which is Neighborhood Keeper. Roadmap item 5.6 was to make sure to share not only threat and vulnerability information, but also those mitigation strategies. And that's why things like our playbooks and kind of what we're doing there was really important, to not only tell you something's wrong, but actually what you're supposed to do about it when an attack happens. And then roadmap items 1.5 and 4.6 were really about helping make the business case and learning from these cyber incidents. As Tim noted, there are way more things happening than people realize. I still remain very optimistic that our community is really well off, and I think we are constantly better than people realize. But the threat is growing far more aggressively than people realize as well. I know from our team, as an example, we have the largest incident response team for ICS in the world, and we get called in a lot on things that never go public, and they are way more numerous than I think people would ever have dreamt. And so we need to start learning from those lessons, but you can abstract out things like victim information. You don't need to know what company was hit to learn from the attack. So what we put together, like I said, is this Neighborhood Keeper program. So it's led by Dragos. We specifically asked for members to join in the beginning for the proposal, and these are the folks that stepped up and I think showed a lot of electric sector leadership in doing so. So first and foremost, the electric ISAC said, we'll be there. Whatever you do, we want to be part of it. We believe in kind of the mission. Even though it's a DOE program overall, or kind of DOE sponsored program, the Idaho National Labs specifically said, yeah, this is something that we could definitely be a part of. The electric ISAC's goal was to help and enrich the CRIPS data set. Idaho National Labs goal was especially around Coyote. So they're both serving almost an advisory type functions of what we build to make sure it fits into that ecosystem that the community has come to build already. I often say that the electric sector specifically has put in a lot of plumbing. We just need to start pumping the water through it. And then Ameren, First Energy, and Southern Company, as asset owners and operators in our community, as large companies, stepped up and said, yeah, we will put our names on this. We will be part of this. Let's get this effort going. And again, a lot of leadership shown in doing that. So the program, and I'm going to walk you through in the next couple of slides to try to visualize this for you. The program is built so everybody can benefit, but it's really geared actually towards a lot of the smaller infrastructure sites. So for our Dragos Platform customers, as an example, who are large investor-owned utilities or large infrastructure companies, they're still platform customers. They can just now opt in to share their insights into Neighborhood Keeper. And in doing so, they can get those insights directly back. But what we're doing is we're taking that Dragos Platform COTS technology and we're giving it away for near cost, as low as we can get, to cooperatives and municipalities, and connecting them up to the analytic framework that is Neighborhood Keeper. So getting them affordable technology, getting them insights, and getting them recommendations. And I'll walk you through kind of how it all works. So step one is we do deploy a lower cost version of the Dragos Platform. So I'll be very candid in this and say, yeah, of course we're going to charge big companies off of value of what we can deliver in the Dragos Platform. We're a business. We are 100% going to do that. I have no desire to profit off of smaller infrastructure providers. So there's really nothing different in the platform. I'll do a trimmed down view for cooperative community just so they can focus on what's important. but it's the same technology, but we're just doing it lower priced for the cooperatives and communities, just because, again, I don't think it's appropriate or really ethical at that point to profit off the smaller players. So we take a low-cost version of the Dragos platform, but same tech, and deploy it to cooperatives, municipalities, and basically really any small infrastructure provider. We have water and some manufacturing as well that we're doing. After that, we connect them up to the Neighborhood Keeper cloud. And that at first sounds scary. The idea that we're connecting up some sensor that has insight into the operations technology environment into a cloud-based environment sounds idiotic on almost every level at first pass. But the reality is those sensors, if you will, those network appliances that have insight in the ICS, roll up to an on-prem site store, that on-prem server, that it has a connection to send data out to Keeper, out to the Keeper program, but all of the data actually stays on site. And I'll explain what that means here in 2 slides. But no IP addresses, no packet captures, no logs, nothing gets shares out to Neighborhood Keeper, only the output of detections that fire. So I'll give you a couple examples here in a second, but it's important to stress that one day the cloud's going to get compromised. We know that. Anything that you store a bunch of data in is going to get compromised. And when the Neighborhood Keeper cloud gets compromised, the adversaries are going to find exactly 0 information. And there is no data related to the customers that are stored there, and all of it is completely anonymous. How does that work? So third step for us is connecting up our partners. EISAC and INL are the first ones. They're by no means the only ones we're talking to, and we have no desire to make this one agency versus another. We're in discussions, even though it's a DOE sponsored program, we're in discussions with DHS and others on making sure that we can share these insights. When I go and testify in front of the Senate or go talk to a congressman, it is very much a common concern that they would like insight into what's happening in our infrastructure, especially around threats. But the concern from asset owners and operators is, I don't want to give you remote access to my environment or be pressed to give you a bunch of insights, data, whatever, especially if it can be used against me, or if you're going to come knock on my door and take over during an incident, which has happened before. So instead, I see this as a mechanism to get government and partners insight that they need and rightfully expect, but also do it in a way that protects our asset owners and operators and community, but also in a way that actually is useful to everybody. So we do share that out to EISEC and INL. And essentially, instead of just centralizing a bunch of data and hoping that somebody does work with it, even though other teams are able to take advantage of that data set, like your asset owners as an example can go through and look for new threats as well, we're not going to wait on anybody to do it, kind of the tragedy of the commons effect. The Dragos intelligence team specifically is going to continue to author threat analytics, specifically looking for behaviors of ICS adversaries and their methods, and constantly pushing those detections to the Neighborhood Keeper cloud. So essentially how that works is the Dragos Intel team could push out and say, we're concerned that we're seeing in our intelligence compromised vendor VPNs. So we see that supply chain is a big discussion. Maybe we see an integrator that got compromised and through our other sources. And we write an analytic to look for not the IP address, but the behavior of a compromised VPN. Then we can push that out to the Neighborhood Keeper cloud, which makes it available to all the participants. And we would not know, so in the graphic it shows 2 out of the 3 participants or 2 out of the 4 participants are compromised. We would not know who had that alert. All we would know is, utility 1 or manufacturing company 1 or whoever, some unique identifier that we don't have visibility into. We just know it's an identifier. All we would know is Analytic 3 alerted at 2:30 on August 8th, 2019. And that's quite literally all the data that gets stored in the Keeper cloud. Again, no IP addresses, no packet capture, no logs, nothing. It's just storing the metadata of Analytic 3 alerted. That is most certainly less data than everybody would like, but the reason this works is because we're front loading what we're looking for first. It's essentially the idea of collecting all the data and then asking questions of it, or just asking questions of the data to begin with. In other words, a lot of people centralize a lot of data. That's why a lot of the sharing programs have failed over the years, is they want to centralize a lot of data and then go fishing in it. And in reality, if you already have intelligence, if you already have the insights of what adversary methods are, then you can just go ask yes or no analytical questions of your community. Yes or no, did you see this? Yes, we did. Great. Now we know that Analytic 3 wasn't just some false positive. It's actually occurring at maybe 15 sites across the electric grid. Or, hey, you know, when big headlines come out, you know, the Russians are in the power grid, they're compromised hundreds of victims. Did they? Let's check. Well, you know, that's classified. No, it's not. Tell me the behavior we're looking for. Okay, well, we're looking for Trojanized software in ICS environments. Okay, here's the behavior, capture as an analytic, let's push it out. Nope, it's not really hundreds, it's 5, but it's still important that 5 people are compromised. And so what happens there is then we're able to push back to those entities and say, look, you had this analytic fire and it was important. So instead of hoping a cooperative or municipality, or even hoping like an investor-owned utility has time to go through every single alert they see in a day, we push back and prioritize that one. And so it's really about prioritization. And so we say, look, here is the insight to the larger community. You should be on the lookout for analytic 3. If it fires right now, you should really focus on it because it's related to campaign or a trend of adversary activity we're seeing. And if you are one of the people that it already fired in, we don't know who you are, but you should reach out for help. And that's really, to me, where the concept of neighborhood keeper comes in, because what's happening with your investor-owned utilities and the larger infrastructure companies is they're signing up to be a keeper in their area. What that means is, yes, they're sharing and they're getting data and they're getting value out of it, but they're also signing up to say, if you are a smaller infrastructure provider and you need help, and you've got that notification that something bad is happening in your environment, here's our phone number, here's our contact information. And so in short, that when that alert occurs and Dragos goes, or EISAC or INL goes, that one's important, then the notification goes out to the smaller infrastructure players and says, here's your list of contact numbers. Here's the DOE, DHS, EISAC, here's Southern Company, who's whoever, here's Dragos, whatever. Pick one. It's all on you. We don't know who you are. We can't force you to do anything, but you know something's wrong, and here are options to get help. And that way, again, it makes it an opt-in program versus an opt-out program. It makes it where the data can't be abused, makes it where there's no data that get compromised in the cloud, and it also makes it where there's a common technology stack. One of the big problems about going in and doing things like incident response is you have to collect the data ahead of the incident for it to be useful. And if somebody comes in from one power company to another or one water company to another, depending on their security stack and how they got it configured and their environmental coverage and similar, you may spend 80% of the incident just trying to get a lay of the land. But in this way, there's a common technology stack that everyone's trained and aware of and knows how to use. And so we can jump right into the mix and take care of folks. So for us, essentially what's going on is this is considered a 2-year R&D grant by DOE. So they funded sort of a cost share mechanism for our development efforts into the Neighborhood Keeper cloud. The idea was to get a low-cost version of the Dragos platform out to the small providers to be able to use. The initial proposal was it needed to be under $100,000 a year, which is not low cost. I'm glad that bar was set so that we can plow through it. Matt's going to talk about what we think it will be, which unfortunately $100,000 a year was actually really cheap in compared to some of the other national programs, but we are definitely well below that. And again, low touch point. We can't have something that's just generating alerts for people because people don't have time to go through them. So it's the ability for us to prioritize and help people figure out what they should focus on. It's also no trust. Again, no sensitive data leaves the participant site. It's only analytical outputs. None of it's personally identifiable. If you join the Neighborhood Keeper program, we know that your company is in the program because you have to sign a contract and join the program. After that, we don't know who you are inside the data set. We only know when you start and when you leave the program. From a shared insights, again, this is where the Electric ISAC, INL, and others can publish out trends and insights to the larger community. They can use it to enrich CRISP and Coyote data sets, but really the EISAC's role, in my opinion here, is to be able to publish out a non-vendor related insight of here's trends and analysis. And those should really be used to inform Congress. They should be used to inform the community, help with resourcing discussions, help tailor NIST and NERC and the other standards and frameworks and regulations to actually be focusing on what's really happening in the ICS threat landscape and not just IT. Again, enrichment of the different efforts that are ongoing, whether it's CRISP and Coyote or CAT or whatever it might be, giving those insights into those programs to help enrich them. And then, as I said, for people that are in the program, they will have the Dragos platform, obviously, whether they're a small player or a large player. and the ability to get those immediate machine speed insights, alert prioritizations, and at speed detections. It really provides that kind of ecosystem that we've always wanted, which is if one of us gets hit, everybody knows about it and everyone knows how to deal with it. And it's done finally, in my opinion, in a way that's accessible to everybody. And it's done finally in a way that we don't have to worry about compromising our data and insights and security. So for the last portion of the call, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Bodman just to give us a status update of where we are today. Matt, over to you.
Great, thank you. So as an update, I just wanted to let people know that I've been traveling around the country, meeting with folks, doing various presentations, and we've received a ton of interest from municipalities, cooperatives, and investor-owned utilities. At this point, we have close to 20 utilities have expressed interest, and as you can see from the list, there's a fairly good number of existing public participants. We have others who haven't been identified publicly, but are absolutely interested in the program. We are currently finishing up a deployment with Connexus. We have 4 other kind of smaller co-ops and munis that we're working through, getting into a deployment state, and we're working to essentially do kind of like a case study with them, and then work out and how to report that to the industry. Let's see, there we go. So as we work through the development, one of the things we're absolutely working on is trying to make sure that the program costs stay low. So we're working on different ideas. When we have technology solutions, we work through them and try to figure out the ones that make sense from a cost perspective, as well as delivering the results. At this point, the numbers we're looking at are between 25 and 40,000 per year, which I think is pretty good overall. At this point, we're looking at like 3-year company programs, and we're actually working with APPA and others like EEI and Congress to try to find funding opportunities for some smaller operators that that may look at 40 and say, wow, geez, that's still a big chunk. So we've got some opportunities there that are working, and then Dragos and EEI have agreed that participants will be part of the Cyber Mutual Assistance Program, where they can leverage that program to receive assistance in the event that they have an event. So that's all I have in terms of the updates. I'm happy to turn that back. Oh, sorry. There we go. There's my picture.
You spooked.
I know.
Start off the call with Tim saying how spooky you are, and now there you are at a podium.
So I do have some upcoming events. It's not just me, but we're going to be out at the APPA Western Regional Cybersecurity Summit. I'm going to be at the Oklahoma Association of Electric Cooperatives in September, and then at the ALDC Fall IT Workshop in October, where we're going to be co-presenting with Connexus on a case study. And then we'll be at the APPA Cybersecurity Summit in November in Tennessee, hanging out and making ourselves available to talk to anybody that's interested in the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and so to kind of close out before I jump into questions and then turn it back over, the program, like I said, was supposed to be like a 2-year R&D effort from DOE. We don't need the 2 years, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule. What really is occurring now is just rolling it out to more participants. The whole R&D program was only supposed to be those 3 original participants. They were kind of excited if we could add any more than that, but because the community has been so awesome, we've blown past that number. Like Matt said, we're in the process with 20 of them, but we also have I think 7 or 8 already, probably more than that now, already sharing into the program. So we've got data flowing, everything's working. Really what we owe to the industry is to start reporting out on this stuff. It's the other reason I like the fact that it was tied to a DOE grant is there is an expectation of public publishing of reporting and white papers on what's working and what's not working and just lessons learned. I think that's one of the best things about any R&D program is no matter how successful or not it is, everyone actually learned something. But we're already starting to see successes, so everyone's pretty excited. Pretty excited to continue to work with INL and the ISAC and others. And then, yeah, definitely if you're interested in signing up, hit us up if you have questions or just want to sign up directly. You can you kind of join on either one of 3 lists. Either you're a larger entity and you want to be part of the program, so you go down the route of becoming a Dragos Platform customer, and then you just opt in. It's free to opt in. And if you're a smaller infrastructure provider, you're on either one of those last two lists. Either you can self-fund right now, and in some cases we've just taken the hit internally and just paid for some folks. But the second list is, hey, we're really interested in this, but we would need funding from government. And what I do, be perfectly candid, is I go to Congress and others and say, look, why aren't we just funding this for cooperatives and smaller utilities? So I can't promise anything, but my dream is to get the U.S. Senate and Congress to effectively make sure that this is accessible to everybody. The good news too is we've already started seeing a lot of activity from other countries. We are getting ready to roll something out, probably 5 sites in Australia this year is the goal, to start bridging not only what we're seeing in the North America community, but start getting global insights into that threat landscape. And we've been pretty excited about the people stepping up and the companies stepping up across different regions of the world that have sort of raised their hand and said, when you're ready, here we are. So just awesome community focus so far. So let's see, the first question, and this one might be more for you, Tim. It says, you say that we're going to fix reporting through regulation. Why is the electric sector the only ICS vertical that is currently required to report cybersecurity incidents? Oh, I've got opinions, but Tim, you're best suited for that.
Why are they the only ones required? I think so across, you have to understand sort of the history of where it came from, and I'll do this as fast as I can because I assume you have other questions waiting. Utilities understood that they could impact each other. So about 40, 50 years ago, they decided to start doing voluntary guidelines. Over time, the voluntary guidelines that were in place became more of a official, and then over time they became financially sanctionable. I don't know how many industries would create the same types of controls with the same stringency if they knew they were going to be enforceable from the beginning. Meaning we built all these things long before they were enforceable, knowing it was the right thing to do. They became enforceable and sanctionable later. Other sectors look to that, and I think they're reluctant to create those and enforce them, knowing there could be penalties.
Yeah, that's a good answer. My cynical, candid take would be regulations starting in the electric sector, because everyone associated electric sector with Cyber 9/11 and Cyber Pearl Harbor, and then as policymakers and framework makers and the folks that actually work on regulation look, they're like, what do you mean there's gas pipelines? So it's really just, I think, the world waking up to the fact that we have a interconnected industrial infrastructure, and so now I like it or not, more regulation is coming to different sectors. How likely will Neighborhood Keeper be applied to other industries like gas pipelines or refinery? It's already in play. So we talk a lot about the electric sector, largely just because they're the ones that are publicly stepping up. A lot of our participants, we have an oil refinery, a couple water sites, gas pipeline, and some of the earlier participants and the other ones are participants. They just don't want to be publicly identified. The moment that we have folks that want to be publicly identified, we'll make case studies out of them and share out to the industry as well. But this is really for all of industrial infrastructure. It's just easier to start in electric given the nature of the community so far. Another question, what would you need to have access to the anonymized statistics, reports, et cetera? Do I need to sign paperwork or NDAs? No. So the direct day-to-day, you get the insights, the data, and to have understanding of prioritization of alerts and new analytics and similar, you've got to have the CODS technology, which is the Dragos Platform. So you got to be a Dragos Platform customer, whether you're a large entity or a smaller entity. Again, we're largely giving away the technology to the smaller entities, but you have to have that tech. If you are talking about the statistics and the reporting off of it, not the day-to-day sort of machine speed stuff, that's going to come through at least 3 avenues. Dragos will do an annual view of it. Right now we have our year in review reports. Go to our website. Every year we publish year in review reports off like the vulnerabilities and threats and lessons learned we have. There will be a new one that's Neighborhood Keeper focused. We will keep any sensitive stuff out of there, but it'll be focused on, here's like your top 4 recommendations based on what we learned from the threat landscape over the last year. Here's things that were actually impactful for asset owners and operators to think about and look towards. The other 2 locations would be Electric ISAC and Idaho National Labs. I imagine that they will, I don't want to speak for them, but I imagine they will do a more like TLP Amber type version. And if you're in the ISAC portal, or if you're in INL communities, or if somebody like DHS joins and uses their portal, that's where it might be more of, okay, sure, here's the recommendations, but here's a couple examples. Obviously, it's all still anonymized, but useful to have actual insights. One thing that we see as a challenge today is a lot of companies go, well, I'm not a target, or I'm not having incidents. And the reality is you're just not looking in those networks. And so until the lights go off or something else happens, everyone's like, well, what was that? And to actually have case studies is useful to make the business justification actually even go do ICS security. When an analytic is deployed, does it run against any historical data or just live data? Great question. It's actually a concept. I'll answer both, but the technical answer is it's a concept of batch versus streaming analytics. So live data is going to be off streaming analytics, which is, think of it like manipulations and protocols or a compromised vendor VPN session we're looking at. Batch analytics are going to look across historical data sets. None of that's going to be in the cloud. It's analytics that get pushed to the edge. It gets pushed to the asset owners. And so their data that's actually stored on-prem is where it would run across like that historical look as an example. So we wouldn't have access to it directly, but we still get the same alerts. The value there is, especially if they need help or an instant response or whatever, when they call in other people, that data is still there and stored off for them, so that something like an instant response team or DHS or DOE or whoever, or ideally another company, could help them out and actually have the data needed. Let's see. What's the difference between NetSuite? I have no idea what NetSuite is, other than the fact that IT products and services. I think NetSuite's more of an IT tool. If you're talking about Dragos Platform versus another product, feel free to hit us up. Those type of questions would probably be best to go to either info or sales at Dragos, and folks can get you on board and get demos and similar. But Neighborhood Keeper ends up being far different than sort of a technology. It's more of a sharing program, if you will, but actually getting the insights versus just centralizing data and going. All right, so that was a lot, and then there's just a bunch of other cheeky questions, cheeky comments. I'm going to call out Dave Foose. You cheeky man. Yes, the reason is impact to power is universally capable and explained to the average user. Yes, that's probably the reason for regulation, Dave. Anyways, look, again, thanks so much for taking the time in this presentation to get to know what we're doing. The good news is we're continuing full speed ahead and things are going well. We'll keep reporting out to the community. Like I said, if you want to be involved and engage with us, hit us up at Keepers@Dragos. If you're a larger infrastructure company, feel free to ask the question. I'm happy to come give a presentation or talk about it. And again, thank you not only to my co-presenters today, but also a continued thanks to Electric ISAC, INL, DOE, and then of course the members that have stepped up and really taken this, sort of head on. Good example, Salt River Project wasn't even one of the original named members, and they've been out in the community giving presentations on this and just encouraging communication and sharing between their local infrastructure providers. I'm always astounded at how amazing this community is, and with the right prompt and the right tooling, we see a lot of great things. I think, one that we kind of highlighted quickly over was we've had this cyber mutual assistance program over the years, but we've had no mechanism to actually action it. It's really more of a legal framework to be allowed to respond to each other. And EEI, stepped up and said, hey, yeah, you can use CMA inside of Keeper. So now cyber mutual assistance members can use that vehicle to respond to each other inside of Neighborhood Keeper to be able to have that common tech stack and work together. It's just, this is a very amazing community. The threats are getting worse. They are absolutely getting more aggressive. Tim's beginning of the presentation is right. We're seeing stuff that we really hoped to have never seen before. They're happening, but we have an awesome community, and we're going to win. So thanks so much for your time. Tim, I'll turn it back over to you.
I have nothing more to say. To Tim. You are tricky.
That's fine.
Yeah. I have nothing else to add. I'm going to shut up and we can go to the right Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much, Rob, Tim, and Matthew. Great presentation. For our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcast. You can find your CEUs for all completed webcasts by logging into your SANS portal account, navigate to your account dashboard, and then click My Webcast. You can then download your CEU on the right-hand side of the webpage. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.